Welcome to Soul Stories, where every tale touches the heart, inspires the mind, and stays with the soul. Daniel Harrington had always been the kind of man people pointed at and whispered about, not out of jealousy, but admiration. From a young entrepreneur building companies in a tiny garage to becoming one of the most influential billionaires in the country, Daniel's rise was nothing short of legendary. His confidence inspired others, his speeches filled stadiums, and his success became the benchmark for thousands of dreamers. But on a cold Tuesday morning, his entire world changed. The stock market flashed red, an ocean of numbers collapsing like a burning skyscraper. Daniel stared at the screens as if frozen in time. His top analysts rushed around him, shouting figures, blaming global tension, algorithms, and unpredictable spikes. But Daniel didn't hear a single word. His eyes were locked on the plunging line representing the company he had spent 20 years building. Not a single mistake, a rushed investment, not a decision Daniel made in confidence, believing he could turn anything into gold. But this time, the world didn't bend his way. Within hours, billions vanished from his accounts. Partners withdrew. Shareholders turned their backs. Competitors celebrated quietly, waiting for the giant to fall at by noon. Daniel's phone was filled with messages, not of support, but of abandonment. People he once trusted distanced themselves, deleting his number, pretending they had never been connected. News channels flashed headlines. Billionaire Daniel Harrington loses everything overnight. From empire to ashes, what went wrong? Daniel sat in his office, surrounded by awards, trophies, and photographs of past victories. Things that once made him proud now felt like mocking reminders of how far he had fallen. His hands trembled. His heart felt heavier than the world outside his tall glass windows. He replayed his mistakes again and again, searching for a moment he could rewind. But the truth was simple. No fortune, no matter how big, was safe from one wrong decision. As the evening sunlight faded into a dull orange glow, Daniel looked out at the city he had once ruled. He wasn't the billionaire genius anymore. He wasn't the powerful CEO who changed industries. He wasn't the man thousands cheered for by morning. Daniel Harrington was a ghost of his former self, broken, silent, and utterly alone. His empire had crumbled, but little did he know, fate had quietly left behind one small thread, one forgotten paper, that would soon pull him back from the darkness. The next morning, Daniel Harrington stood outside the towering glass building that once symbolized everything he had achieved. The golden logo that carried his name had already been removed overnight, swiftly, coldly, as if the world couldn't wait to erase him. For a long moment, Daniel simply stared at the entrance, wondering how a place that once buzzed with life now felt like a tomb. When he pushed the doors open, a hollow silence welcomed him. The reception desk, once crowded with visitors and employees lining up for appointments, was empty. The computer screens were shut down, chairs pushed aside, and the fresh flowers he paid for weekly were now wilted and dry. Each step he took echoed in the empty halls, reminding him of a past that now felt like a distant dream. He walked through the corridor, where dozens of employees used to greet him with respect, admiration, even awe. Now, only scattered boxes remained, some open, some overturned, as if people had rushed out without looking back. Files lay thrown in corners, documents trampled. Under hurried footsteps, dust had already begun to settle on desks where ideas were once born, deals were once made, and dreams were once planned. For Daniel, the silence was louder than any chaos he had faced. When he entered his office, the heart of his empire, he almost stopped breathing. The room that once shone with polished wood, glass awards, and vibrant energy now looked like an abandoned warehouse. His bookshelves were empty, his desk cleared, his awards gone. The only thing left was a faint imprint on the wall where his framed portrait once hung. That he walked slowly, touching the surface of his desk, remembering the nights he had sat there working until dawn, believing that nothing could shake his empire. But everything had collapsed in a single night. "Sir?" A soft, familiar voice broke the silence. Daniel turned to see the only person who hadn't abandoned him. The old janitor, Mr. Kareem. His worn uniform and slow steps showed years of quiet service, loyalty that no salary could buy. "You're still here," Daniel whispered, surprised at Kareem gave a small smile. "I thought someone should stay to close the building properly." It didn't feel right to leave it like this. Daniel swallowed hard. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless, stripped of power, stripped of identity, stripped of certainty. He looked around the office one last time, a place where he had built his life, and felt it all vanish in a moment. Little did Daniel know that this empty office still held something, a small detail, a forgotten piece of his past, something that would soon change everything again.
Steve, this is critical evidence. We need to act on it immediately.
Daniel took one final look at his empty office before turning toward the door. There was nothing left here. Not the success, not the pride, not even the memories he once cherished. He sighed deeply and stepped into the hallway, ready to leave behind the ruins of a life he had spent decades building. But just as he reached the elevator, he heard shuffling footsteps behind him. "Sir." Daniel turned slowly. There stood Mr. Kareem, the old janitor, slightly bent, his hands trembling ever so gently. He clutched a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, edges curled, as if it had been forgotten long before the collapse. "Sir, you forgot this one paper," the janitor said softly. Daniel frowned. "What paper?" "Everything important is gone." But Mr. Kareem stepped closer and held it out with both hands, almost respectfully, as though presenting something sacred. "I found it in the back drawer of your old cabinet. Looks like it's been there for years." Daniel hesitated before taking it. The paper felt light, too light to matter. He unfolded it carelessly, expecting it to be some old invoice or a meaningless document from years ago. But as his eyes scanned the page, his heartbeat suddenly changed. The words blurred for a moment, and he blinked twice, reading again to be sure. It was a contract from nearly 7 years ago. His signature clear, the ink slightly faded, and below it, the name of a tiny startup he had once invested in as a favor to a young, hopeful engineer at a company he had completely forgotten about in the chaos of growing his empire. Memory returned like a flash. He had invested a modest amount, pocket change for a billionaire at the time, more out of kindness than business sense. Back then, the startup was nothing more than an idea scribbled on a laptop screen. But now, Daniel's fingers tightened around the paper as he read the last line. "Investor retains permanent 18% equity." His breath caught. 18%. In a company whose name recently filled the news, that a company he remembered hearing about just weeks ago, breaking records, expanding globally, being called the future of technology. It couldn't be. Or could it? "Sir," Mr. Kareem said gently, noticing Daniel's expression change from confusion to shock to something like trembling hope. "I don't know what it means, but I thought maybe it mattered." Daniel looked up, his eyes suddenly bright, a spark returning that he thought he had lost forever. "It matters," he whispered. "It matters more than anything." The forgotten contract trembled in his hands, a piece of paper worth more than the fortune he had lost. And for the first time since his fall, Daniel felt something powerful rising inside him again. Hope. Daniel sat in his car with the old contract trembling in his hands. 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind. Fear, disbelief, hope, and something deeper, a sense of destiny returning to him. Without wasting another second, he called his lawyer, his accountant, and every contact he still had left. Within hours, everything was confirmed. The tiny startup he had invested in 7 years ago, a company he barely remembered, had become one of the fastest-growing tech giants in the world. Their new software had gone viral, adopted globally, valued in billions, and Daniel still owned 18% of it. "Sir," his lawyer said over the phone, voice almost shaking, "you're not just back in the game, you're ahead of it." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He looked out of his car window at the world that had turned its back on him just yesterday. Now, with one forgotten paper, life had handed him a second chance. Maybe even a better one. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, and exhaled a breath he had been holding for days. Not because he was rich again, but because he finally felt alive again. A new dawn. Over the next few weeks, Daniel re-entered the business world, but not with the arrogance he once carried. This time, he moved quietly, thoughtfully, valuing every step. He met with the founders of the tech giant, inspiring them, guiding them, and in return, watching his new fortune rise even higher. Journalists tried to reach him. Old partners tried to reconnect. People who avoided him during his downfall suddenly wanted to be seen with him again. But Daniel wasn't the same man anymore that he rebuilt his empire. Not out of pride, but with purpose. He focused on stability, fairness, and humanity. And every day, he remembered the moment that changed everything. A janitor standing in an empty hallway, holding a single forgotten piece of paper. Honoring loyalty, the first official change Daniel made in his new company shocked everyone. He promoted Mr. Kareem, the quiet janitor who stayed behind when everyone else abandoned him. He made him head of employee welfare, a position with dignity, responsibility, and a salary that changed his entire life. When Daniel gave him the offer, Kareem's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I'm just a janitor." Daniel smiled gently. "No, Kareem, you're the reason I'm standing here today." Daniel often told his team, "Sometimes the smallest things save us in the biggest ways." And for the rest of his life, he never forgot the one truth that changed everything. A fortune can be lost in a night, but a good heart can rebuild an empire.